In the spring of 1854, a tragic and mysterious event struck the Caldwell family of Fayette County, Kentucky. Within a month, 7 members of the family, spanning 3 generations, died from the same strange illness. Doctors from as far as Louisville and Cincinnati were baffled. The symptoms started with severe skin irritation, which quickly turned into open sores, followed by fever, delirium, and death. What made the situation even more troubling was that every family member had been wearing freshly tailored clothing, all sewn by the same person. The authorities buried the case with the bodies, but recently uncovered letters revealed a much darker truth, one that had been hidden from history. The seamstress was a house slave named Dinah, and she had a deadly plan for revenge. Dinah's method was as clever as it was lethal. Before we dive into her story and the fate of the Caldwell plantation, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Also, let us know in the comments what state you're listening from. We love connecting with our viewers and sharing these forgotten stories. The Caldwell plantation, located just 17 miles southeast of Lexington, covered over 2,300 acres of Kentucky's fertile bluegrass region. In 1854, it was one of the most prosperous estates in Fayette County. The estate was filled with rolling tobacco fields that brought in high prices at the Louisville markets. The main house was a grand Georgian colonial, complete with 6 white columns and wraparound verandas, offering a commanding view of the entire operation. Samuel Caldwell had inherited the plantation from his father in 1839 and spent the next 15 years transforming it into one of the most profitable agricultural enterprises in Kentucky. In addition to tobacco, he ran a hemp operation, a lumber mill, and a distillery that produced bourbon whiskey sold as far north as Chicago and as far south as New Orleans. By 1854, Samuel was one of the largest slaveholders in central Kentucky, owning 57 enslaved people. Samuel's wife, Margaret, came from a Virginia tobacco family and had a similar view of enslaved people as tools to be maintained and disciplined. Margaret ruled the household with the same strict control her husband used over the fields. Samuel's mother, Constance, was a 74-year-old widow who had lived through Kentucky's transition from wilderness to plantation society. She took a keen interest in the management of the house slaves and enforced traditional views of white authority over their enslaved workers. Samuel and Margaret's 3 children were central to the family's future. Their son, Thomas, 22 years old, had recently graduated from Transylvania University and was studying law and politics with ambitions of representing Kentucky's interests in the national slavery debate. His cruelty was evident in how he treated the enslaved workforce. Their daughter, Mary Elizabeth, 20, was engaged to Jonathan Pemberton, heir to a neighboring plantation. Their wedding, planned for June 1854, was set to be one of the season's social highlights. The youngest, Samuel Jr., was 17 and already showing a sharp mind for plantation management, learning everything from crop rotation to the psychology of controlling enslaved people. Margaret's unmarried sister, Catherine, had joined the household after their father's death. She ruled over the house slaves with remarkable cruelty. The family's wealth and status depended entirely on the labor of their 57 enslaved workers. Among them, Dinah, a 29-year-old seamstress, was the most skilled and invaluable. She could sew with precision, embroider beautifully, and create clothing that rivaled the latest fashions from Paris and New York. Dinah was born on the plantation in 1825 and had been taught by her mother, Ruth, who had been the head seamstress for the previous generation of Caldwells. Ruth had secretly taught Dinah to read and write, skills that were illegal for enslaved people but made Dinah even more valuable. Dinah's ability to read fashion magazines and follow complex patterns made her indispensable to the Caldwell women. However, what the family didn't know was that Dinah's literacy extended far beyond fashion. She had studied books on chemistry, botany, and medicine, learning about plant toxins and their effects on the human body. Dinah's position in the household was complex. Her skills made her valuable, but her intelligence made her dangerous. While she appeared to be a loyal servant, she secretly harbored resentment for the cruelty she witnessed every day. The winter of 1853 to 1854 had been particularly harsh. Poor tobacco harvests had driven Samuel to impose longer work hours, reduce food rations, and punish any perceived failures. Dinah found herself working long hours to meet the Caldwell family's demands for new clothing and household linens. The emotional strain grew as she watched the suffering of her fellow enslaved people. The breaking point came when Samuel announced his plan to sell Dinah's 14-year-old daughter, Sarah, to pay off a gambling debt incurred by Thomas. Sarah was one of only 3 children Dinah had managed to keep alive, and the thought of losing her to the Deep South pushed Dinah to the edge. It was then that she began formulating her plan for revenge. Using her sewing skills, she would create deadly garments. In early March 1854, Dinah began sewing a new spring wardrobe for Margaret. She worked late into the night, using the finest fabrics imported from Charleston and New York. What the family didn't know was that Dinah had spent months perfecting a method of turning beautiful clothing into weapons. She had learned about plant toxins and their effects on the skin, and she carefully prepared threads soaked in toxic substances from plants found on the plantation. Dinah's first experiment was Margaret's new emerald silk dress. The dress was a masterpiece, but the threads used for the neckline, cuffs, and waist had been soaked in a combination of poison sumac oil and pokeweed extract. Margaret wore the dress to a luncheon on March 12th, where it made a stunning impression. However, as the evening wore on, Margaret began to experience itching along the neckline and wrists, where the dress had touched her skin. She initially thought it was an allergic reaction, but the symptoms worsened overnight, leading to swelling, blisters, and a fever. Despite treatments from Dr. Beaumont, Margaret's condition deteriorated, with similar symptoms affecting other family members. Dinah continued her campaign of revenge, using the same poisoned threads to sew garments for other family members. Samuel Jr. requested new riding clothes, and Thomas needed formal wear for a political rally. Both garments were constructed with even more concentrated toxins. Meanwhile, Mary Elizabeth continued planning her wedding, unaware that Dinah had already prepared her wedding gown, designed to inflict the maximum amount of harm. As April progressed, 3 members of the Caldwell family were suffering from the same mysterious illness. Dr. Beaumont was puzzled and couldn't figure out the cause. He began to notice a pattern. All the victims had worn newly made clothing just before their symptoms appeared. However, the garments seemed perfectly normal to the naked eye. Dinah's method of poisoning was nearly undetectable. Her carefully crafted plan continued as the Caldwell family's condition worsened. The investigation into the mysterious illnesses intensified, but Dinah's secret remained safe, at least for a while. Catherine's corset was the pinnacle of Dinah's vengeance. Her harsh treatment of the house slaves had made her a specific target of Dinah's anger, and the corset was designed to inflict as much visible damage as possible to Catherine's skin, making her suffering impossible to ignore. As Dinah worked on these final preparations, she had to take greater risks to access areas of the house that were usually off-limits to enslaved people. She knew the household's routines well and used her status as the head seamstress to move freely through restricted areas, always maintaining the appearance of legitimate business. Dinah's behavior had begun to change noticeably. Those who knew her well could see that her calm, almost detached demeanor was becoming more pronounced. It was as if she had moved past normal human concerns and was no longer afraid of the consequences of her actions. Her mother, Ruth, recognized these signs from years of experience. She had seen other enslaved people reach their breaking points and decide to resist, no matter the cost. Ruth knew that Dinah had gone beyond the point of no return, committed to completing her plan even if it meant her own life was on the line. Tensions on the plantation reached a breaking point on May 8 when Mary Elizabeth had a relapse after wearing one of her old dresses. Dr. Webb immediately examined the dress and confirmed that it had been poisoned, proving that the person responsible was still active and had continued access to the family's clothing. This discovery led Sheriff Hargrove to impose a lockdown on the plantation. No one could leave, and all enslaved people were subjected to questioning and searches. The investigation revealed Dinah's complex and carefully planned operation. Hidden garments treated with toxins were found in various locations throughout the house. It became clear that what had seemed like an isolated poisoning was, in fact, a systematic campaign carried out over several months. Dr. Webb's analysis showed that Dinah had used at least 7 different toxic plants, combining them in ways that enhanced their effects. The sophistication of her methods suggested a deep understanding of chemistry and botany, skills that rivaled trained scientists of the era. But even as the investigators closed in on her, Dinah had one final surprise in store. She had prepared for every eventuality, hiding garments in places where they would continue to poison the family even after her death. On May 9th, a more thorough search of the Caldwell mansion revealed even more garments soaked in toxins, demonstrating the extent of Dinah's planning. Her notes, discovered hidden beneath floorboards in her room, revealed a knowledge of chemistry that impressed even university-trained scientists. Sheriff Hargrove questioned the enslaved people, but most had no knowledge of Dinah's activities. Her ability to keep her plans secret, while maintaining the appearance of a loyal servant, was remarkable. However, one witness, Solomon Wright, an elderly enslaved man with knowledge of plants, became crucial to exposing the full extent of Dinah's campaign. He had seen Dinah gathering plants and had noticed the correlation between her activities and the family's mysterious illnesses. Solomon eventually spoke out, revealing that Dinah had been planning her revenge for over a year. She had meticulously gathered toxic plants and perfected her techniques, using her knowledge of fabric dyes and traditional remedies as a cover. Dinah had even discussed her plans with him in vague terms, though at the time he hadn't fully understood that she was plotting actual murders. Dinah's preparations were far more sophisticated than anyone could have imagined. Her understanding of toxic plants, how to concentrate their effects, and how to bind them to fabric made her poisons virtually undetectable. Her meticulous notes showed the depth of her planning, revealing a strategy that went beyond personal revenge to include a political motive. Dinah believed that her actions would create fear and paranoia among slaveholders, potentially leading to changes in how enslaved people were treated. On May 10th, Dinah was arrested, her composure throughout the process unnerving the investigators. She remained calm, refusing to admit or deny guilt, and showed no remorse for the suffering she had caused. Her only concern was whether the remaining family members would suffer the same fate. The investigation soon revealed that Dinah had planned for the possibility of her capture. She had prepared enough toxic materials to continue her campaign even if she were caught, ensuring that the family's suffering would not end with her arrest. As the investigation expanded, it was discovered that Dinah's methods had not been unique. There were signs that other enslaved people in the region might have been using similar tactics. This revelation sent waves of panic through Kentucky's plantation owners, who feared that Dinah's actions might be part of a larger, coordinated effort. The federal authorities were soon called in, and a broader investigation began. The discovery of letters between Dinah and enslaved people on neighboring plantations revealed that the knowledge of toxic plant preparations was being shared among literate enslaved people. The investigation quickly turned from a local criminal matter to a potential national issue, as it was revealed that similar mysterious deaths had occurred in other slaveholding families in Kentucky and southern Ohio. The methods Dinah had used were now recognized as part of a larger resistance effort that had gone undetected for years. The news of these discoveries caused widespread fear among slaveholders, leading to legislative sessions and emergency measures aimed at preventing further uprisings. As the investigation into Dinah's activities deepened, it became clear that her plan was far more extensive than anyone had realized. She had been using the Caldwell family's social connections and her reputation as a talented seamstress to target influential people throughout Kentucky. Her poisoning campaign was part of a broader strategy to disrupt the political and social systems that maintained slavery. The implications of her actions reached far beyond the Caldwell plantation, suggesting that other enslaved people had been involved in similar resistance efforts, hiding in plain sight. In the end, Dinah's actions demonstrated the power of quiet resistance and the intelligence of those who had been oppressed. Her meticulous planning and the scientific ingenuity behind her poisons highlighted the extent to which enslaved people were able to use their knowledge and skills to fight back against the system that oppressed them. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Dinah's story was not just one of personal revenge but a powerful statement against the brutality of slavery and the people who upheld it. Governor Lazarus Powell declared martial law across 5 counties and authorized military units to conduct thorough searches of plantation properties for evidence of organized slave resistance. Federal investigators were also sent to neighboring states, uncovering a disturbing pattern of mysterious deaths among slaveholding families that suggested Dinah's methods had been shared within a broader network of literate enslaved people. The discovery that such sophisticated resistance operations had been carried out right under the noses of white authorities for years caused a crisis of confidence in the systems that upheld slavery. Even as the full scope of Dinah's actions became clear, she showed no signs of satisfaction or regret. She had prepared for her own death as thoroughly as she had prepared for her campaign of murder. Dinah faced her execution with the same calm determination that had defined her entire mission. On the night before her execution, May 19th, she made a statement that would linger in the minds of investigators and plantation owners for years. Her words would forever haunt those who heard them, serving as a reminder of the violent repercussions that the slavery system inevitably bred. On May 20, 1854, Dinah was executed in front of a crowd of over 200 plantation owners, government officials, and curious spectators. Her death marked the end of what newspapers dubbed the most diabolical slave conspiracy in American history. But even after her execution, the terror that she had unleashed throughout Kentucky's slaveholding society did not end. Dinah's final statement from the gallows was chilling. Addressing the crowd of plantation owners who had come to watch her die, she said, "You have taught us that human beings can be property. You have shown us that families can be separated for profit, that children can be sold like livestock, that human suffering is acceptable when it serves white interests. I have simply used your own lessons to teach you what it feels like to be powerless in the face of systematic cruelty." Dinah's words were recorded by reporters and officials, and though they would be suppressed for decades, they would later emerge as one of the most powerful statements of slave resistance ever captured. Her intelligence and moral clarity, even in her final moments, challenged the fundamental assumptions that justified slavery. Following Dinah's execution, an investigation revealed the full extent of her network and the impact it had on slaveholding society. Dr. Webb's analysis of similar cases in neighboring counties confirmed that at least 12 prominent slaveholding families had lost members to coordinated poisoning campaigns using methods identical to Dinah's. Federal authorities identified over 30 cases of mysterious deaths among pro-slavery politicians, judges, and plantation owners, all of which followed the same pattern of toxic plant-based poisonings applied through clothing. The discovery of Dinah's methods and her vast network of resistance sent waves of panic through Kentucky's plantation owners. The realization that house slaves might possess both the knowledge and motivation to kill their owners through their clothing created a level of paranoia that made normal plantation operations increasingly difficult. Many slaveholding families began to dismiss their trusted enslaved seamstresses, opting to import finished clothing from northern manufacturers instead. The psychological impact of these revelations affected the entire structure of slaveholding society. The trust that had allowed the system to function efficiently was replaced by suspicion and fear. Solomon Wright, the elderly enslaved man whose testimony had helped expose Dinah's methods, lived for 3 more years before dying of natural causes in 1857. His role in the investigation made him a controversial figure among the enslaved population, with some seeing him as a traitor, while others viewed him as someone who had tried to prevent further suffering. The surviving members of the Caldwell family never fully recovered. Samuel Caldwell, though not personally affected by Dinah's poison garments, was so traumatized by the systematic murder of his family that he sold the plantation in 1856 and moved to California. Margaret Caldwell lived until 1859 but remained an invalid, permanently scarred from the toxins in her dress and psychologically shaken by the betrayal she had experienced. Catherine, who survived her exposure to Dinah's poisons, suffered permanent damage that left her unable to live independently. Constance Caldwell, the elderly matriarch, died 2 weeks after Dinah's execution. Whether from natural causes or the delayed effects of toxic exposure was never determined. Her death symbolized the end of the Caldwell family's prominence in Kentucky's plantation society. The plantation was eventually divided and sold, with the main house left to decay. No family would live in the house where so many mysterious deaths had occurred. Dr. Webb's analysis of Dinah's methods contributed to advances in toxicology, providing valuable insights that would later be used to develop treatments for poisoning and security measures to detect similar attacks in the future. Dinah's techniques, particularly her methods of binding toxins to fabric, were years ahead of contemporary scientific understanding. Her ingenuity in using plant toxins for assassination highlighted the intelligence and resourcefulness of enslaved people, which had often been underestimated by their oppressors. Dinah's campaign was a significant chapter in the history of slave resistance. It demonstrated the lengths to which enslaved people could go to fight back against the system that oppressed them. Her story challenges the traditional narrative of slavery and highlights the creative and strategic forms of resistance that were employed by enslaved individuals who had been denied every other avenue of justice. Dinah's story is a chilling reminder of the incredible resilience and intelligence that oppressed people can wield, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. Her calculated campaign of resistance, using methods that were both scientifically advanced and strategically brilliant, challenged everything the slaveholding class thought they knew about control and power. Dinah didn't just seek personal revenge for the suffering she had endured, she crafted a plan that struck at the very foundation of the system that had dehumanized her and countless others. Her story reveals a profound truth about human nature. Even in the most dire circumstances, the human spirit can find ways to resist, adapt, and even subvert systems of cruelty. Dinah's actions proved that the violence inherent in slavery would eventually give rise to violence in return, but her form of resistance was not one of brute force. It was intellectual, subtle, and strategic. By leveraging her skills and knowledge, Dinah turned the tools of her oppression, the clothing she sewed for her masters, into deadly weapons of justice. The discovery of her methods sent shockwaves through the entire slaveholding community, shattering the false sense of security that plantation owners had long held. The fear and paranoia that followed were a testament to the effectiveness of her plan. Her actions laid bare the inherent contradictions of slavery. A system built on the idea that some humans could be owned and controlled by others was inevitably unstable, for it could never fully suppress the will and intellect of those it sought to oppress. Dinah's execution, though tragic, did not mark the end of her influence. Her story sparked a new understanding of the complexity of slave resistance, showing that even in the darkest of times, oppressed people could find ways to strike back in unexpected ways. Her legacy, though suppressed for years, continues to resonate today as a powerful reminder of the lengths to which people will go to fight for their dignity, justice, and humanity, even when the odds seem insurmountable.